فقط للتذكير للي لسه دخلوا متأخر، راح نكمل إلى بعد الستة حتى لو ما خلصنا. But don't worry, attendance I'll take it before 6. So even if you have a class or anything else, you can leave. But we have to complete the meeting 3, even if we need to do it. الكويز الأول راح يكون chapter 1 and 2. But we have to complete meeting 3 على أساس إن to be all of يعني كل ال departments يكونوا على نفس السكيدجولز. So don't worry، راح أرسل لكم ال recorded اللي مضطر إنه هو يمشي بعد الستة، راح أرسل لكم هي. Okay, Nisreen, I already said that and I already emailed you. Don't worry about it. I'll email you with recorded and you can complete from where you started, and don't worry about the attendance as well, okay? Starting from today, attendance it will be recorded وراح يكون عليها 5 درجات من الكوردينيتور تنسيق. الكويزز راح تبدأ قريب، راح تشمل أول كويز الميتنج الأول والثاني، اوكي؟ So خلينا نبدأ meeting number 3. No, I don't know yet. I don't know about the date. So the meeting 3 راح يتكلم is going to talk about the object and the classes. So we'll first talk about how we can declare, create the object والclasses، كيف انهم مختلفين او ايش العلاقة عفوا بينهم. Create the object, how we can use the constructors, how you can access the object via references variables، كيف ممكن ان بعد انشائها ممكن ان احنا نعمل لها access ونستخدمها. distinguish between الانستنس and the static variables والmethods. طيب. So then we will talk about how we're going to use the getter and setter methods to define the private data. بعد ما ننشئ الobject, how we can use the getter والsetter inside the methods, عفوا inside the classes to get the information. So first of all, what's the object oriented? We already explained this in the first class. So and you're supposed to know it at this point. ايش اللي يميز الجافا? Why is it object oriented? Because it involves programming using object. Because you're going to have classes. Those classes is going to create objects related to that class. ايش هو الكلاس؟ So sorry, ايش هو الobject? So an object is referred as an entry in a real world that can be distinctly identified. An object is an instance of class. يعني احنا راح يكون عندنا الكلاس، بعد ما نعمل الكلاس الobject راح يكون جزء منه متعلق فيه as a part of يعني المحتويات اللي بالobject متعلقة بالمحتويات اللي موجودة بالclasses depending on what you already have on the classes, as we get to see soon. For example, student disk circles and buttons. For example, مثلا اللي كانوا يذكروا في المحاضرة الأولى we already assign a picture of different type of dogs. So we can define the class of dogs. You put the size, the length, the color. Then the object is the different type of dogs. That's you put a name and you put the information of it. Another example, a car مثلا. So you can define the cars. You put the vendor, the name, the colors, whatever. And then each type of car, it will be an object that's having the informations related to what you have on the classes. The state of an object consists of a state data field, also known as properties, attributes. The classes has 2 parts. It has the state and the behavior. الستيت هي عبارة عن okay. So the state is data. The behavior هي methods. So if you would like to imagine how the class look be, so you having, we will see it soon. So you have the class name, you name it, and then in the first part here, you have the states, which is data. So you're having a data part here. And here you have an action part, you have a behavior part, which is in methods. Yes, Ruwaida, exactly, UML diagrams, we will see it soon. So this is what I'm talking about. So this is the class. You put the class name. So the class name is circle. And you need to distinguish between the class name والobject name. So هنا عملنا الكلاس name is circle. It has a data field, it has a radius, نصف القطر. تمام? And then it has a method get area. لحساب المساحة. تمام؟ So هنا في data you just have a data radius. So data is going to have a value. Always anything is going to go in the data part is going to have a value. Either it's a primitive or references data. It could be primitive, so you have radius and you put a number here, as in this example, it's going to be integer, double, or whatever. And sometimes it may be an array or a string or an object, and it's going to refer to somewhere else as a string, for example. So at the end, it's going to have a value. So what is going to go? Where is going to go? On the data. However, anything that has an action, behavior is going to go inside the methods. So after we creating a class called circle, inside the main, this is usually created in the main. So this is when you're doing a run. When you run the program, you will creating an object. Here, circle, first, you remember when we initialized integer, string, you first put a type, right? So what is the type? Circle. It is the type of this, the circle here. And then what is the type on the other object? Is circle. What is the type of the third object? Circle. So all is related to this class here. Then you put the name of the object. Each object has its own data. So you here see a radius is 10, here's 20, here's 125. Okay? An object has both state and behavior. The states define the object, current value of the attribute. Behavior defines what object does. Okay? So the classes, ايش هي وظيفته? What is going to do? What's the classes actually? Construct and define an object at of the same time. A class is used to group related objects together. A class is constant as a factory to create an object. هو عبارة عن الفactory، هو المكان اللي راح ينشأ من الobject. So you can have a car, like the class اللي حق الcar, and then you can have different type of cars. You can have a class of students, then you have hundreds or thousands of students with a different information. You can have the class of, for example, the shapes. Then you can have square, circle, whatever. They having sometimes the same parameters, so you can still have it or use it. Yes, Ruwaida, this feature on the class and object, it's help you reuse the same information again and again. So instead of every time, for example, if we having a class for student and you put student's name, student's phone number, ID, whatever, instead of do it again and again, you creating a class, you put the data on it, and then create object for each student register in the university, for example. Okay. So Java class uses variables with methods. It's exactly what we said at the beginning. It could call variables, data, attributes. So always remember this picture. At the top, you having data or variables or attributes on the top, and then we having methods at the bottoms of the classes. And then you're creating an object which is have related information. Additionally, a class will provide a specific type of methods known as a constructor. Now we will go more detail. الآن عرفنا أي class راح يكون فيه في البداية مثل ما ذكرنا مسبقا عنده الداتا أو ال variables and then it has the methods. Now in methods, not all methods have the same type, so it has two parts. We said it has data at the top and then we having methods, right? Not all methods are same. We have different type of method. There's what is called constructor, and there is what is called sitter and getter. What is called sit and get, related to the variable, and the other type of methods. أول نوع, the first type, we're going to talk about the constructor. What is the goal, or what's the rule of the constructor? It creates a new object. The constructor invoked to construct object from this class. It is going to create a new object from this class. So here's an example. So the class, this is the class name. Then this is the part, if you remember. So here is the data or the variables, and here are the methods. The first type of the methods are the constructors. So let's first talk about, this is the class, this is the name. The class name. Then we having the data field, which is we having radius with a type double. And we assign, or we will give it a default value, which is 1.0. We having different type of constructor. Some constructor, if you remember when we study array, string, object, sometimes you assign a value. If you remember, we just talked about string builder. Sometimes you tell the capacity, you assign the capacity, or you put the string during a new string builder. Inside it, you put an argument. Sometimes you don't put anything. If you don't put anything, which is called zero argument constructors, this is going to give the default information, for example. So the first type, there is different type of constructor. The first type called zero argument constructor. What is zero argument constructor? Is take no argument at all. And sometimes do some some instruction inside it. Sometimes, like in this examples, do nothing. The other type of constructor is one argument, and you can have two arguments, you then have more. So you give an option to the user later. أنت تعطي خيارات إلى المستخدم مستقبلا لما يكتب بالمين، لما يحب ينشأ object من نوع هذا الكلاس، ممكن إنه هو ينشأه باستخدام القيم الديفولت اللي موجودة بدون ما يرسل any argument، أو إنه هو ممكن إنه هو يرسل argument واحدة أو two arguments depending on what you designed here. So if send no arguments, will go with the default. If it's send one argument, it is going to do whatever put it on this method. So for example, in this method, they said the arguments is going to be type of double, and then what it's going to do is going to assign whatever the user assigned, put it as an argument to the radius. احنا قلنا at the beginning the default is 101 1.0. So this is the default. Okay, if a user would like to use another value, it can invoke that to use it one argument constructor, sending the value to it here. Okay, so here is going to be talk about the first type of method, which is the constructors. Here's all constructor. From here to here, constructors. You're not going to use both of them for the same object, either this or this one, depending on the need. Then you can have other types of methods. For example, you can have get area, radius, multiple by radius, multiple by 3.4. What is this? Does anyone of you know what is this? Why 3 point? So we will do المساحة الاريا للدائرة. ايش هي 3.141؟ الباي. Thank you guys. So for those who don't remember what it is or how we calculate الاريا السيركل عبارة عن الباي multiple by الار which is the radius power of 2. You can either using the power function or you can say radius multiple by radius. Okay. Here we're going to show what is called UML diagram, which is unifying, modifying the language. It's going to show the information in a useful way to remember. So at the top, you put the class name, then you put a data field. For example, we're having a radius double, and then you put the methods, including the constructors. So first here we having those are the constructor. Then here you having in methods. We'll talk about this type of methods here. This is specific type of method, which is a setter and getter. So this is the class. How we can draw the objects? We draw it in this way. You put it name of the object, a type, and then this is a type. So you put a type and you put a name, and then you put the data value of it here. Here is an example of a class called test circle. I prefer to show it to you. So I don't know if you noticed that inside your slide, if you click on test symbol circle, so this test symbol circle is the class name. So this is the class that is going to have a main test class. But the main class that have the information is called test symbol class. If you click it, let me share. If you click it, it's going to open the browser with the example. So if you prefer to see it and try it, just click on that green square. So we having two classes here. A test symbol circle, and the second one is a simple circle. Okay. Yes, I do, Dana. So a test symbol circle has a main method. A symbol circle is the class which is having the whole information. So let's starting from a simple circle. So simple circle here, it has a data, it's called radius with a type double. Then it has a constructor with a 0 argument, which is going to make the radius default as 1. The other constructor is a 1 argument constructor. So you're having simple circle, and then you will assign a double value here, and you get it to assign it to the radius. We having a method area, which is we already talked about it, and then we having a method called get parameters that is going to have a 0 argument, but is going to return a double. We're not going to talk about it, it's not including in the presentation, but it's just calculate parameters. And there is another method called set radius. So if you're using the first constructor, which is you don't set radius, but you would like to change it later, how you get to change it? Use the set radius method. ايش الهدف من ان احنا نعمل الست هنا؟ ليش يكون عندنا فانكشن ثانيه الى الست؟ لنفترض ان المستخدم اختار خيار انه هو يعمل نيو اوبجكت باستخدام الزيرو ارجيومنت، وكان هو انعمل اساين الى الراديوس بالديفولت 1. Later the user would like to change the value to new radius. How can do this? It has to use set radius, okay? Even if you're using the second one and later would like to change it, it has to use a set radius. So this just to construct. دائما نتذكر during inside the class at the beginning we will have a data, then we will have the methods. The methods have 3 types. Constructors. It has a getter and a setter. This is not a getter. This is a getter and a setter, and you can have maybe a getter, and you can have other type of methods. Okay, so this is the main class. Later, you can use that class. How we can use it? We defined a new class called test symbol circle. So you're creating a circle with a radius 1. How we get to do it? Symbol circle, which is this name, the type of the class, the name of the object, new, and then the type of the class symbol circle. And in this case, we're using 0 arguments constructor. When you do new, this is what do mean about constructor. This is what is going to hold here. So in this case, a circle, the area of a circle radius, how we can to get it? We put the name of the object, how we can return the value. كيف ممكن نحن نسترجع القيم اللي موجودة هنا؟ توضع النيم الobject, the object name dot الvariables اللي موجودة عفوا الداتا اللي راح تكون موجودة داخل الكلاس inside the class. This is gonna to return a value here, which is gonna to be how much at the beginning since we constructed with 0 arguments. So this is gonna to be how much at the beginning. Circle data radius, how much is gonna to be? In the first place. Are you with me, guys? Circle 1, that's a radius. We use a 0 argument constructor. This is the 0 argument constructor. So how much is going to be circle 1, that's a radius? Yes, 1, thank you. Because it's going to get a default here. Then if we get a circle 1, that's a get array. What is this is going to go? It's going to go to this method. It's going to be 1 multiplied by 1 multiplied by math dotted by, and it's going to calculate the array. Sorry, area. Then creating a second circle, circle number 2, but in this time we're going to use the second constructor, which is having 1 argument. So we are not going to go with this one, we're going to go with this constructor. So you tell me, guys, we sent 25 as an argument to this constructor. Circle 2, the second object here, dot radius, a data in the class, how much is going to be for this object? So circle 2 is different object than circle 1. How much is going to be? Okay, 25, thank you. And then we'll calculate the area, and so on and so forth. So let me run it for you guys. You can do this from your lecture as well, so you can test it right away. So here are the results. Radius 0, and this is the area, and then when the radius 25, the area, and 125 and 100 are the results here. So let's back to our presentation. So this is exactly what I just showed you on the web browser. Now, I'll just say again what I just explained in the example, so you remember it. So constructor, special kind of methods. Invoked to initialize the object. راح نناديها على أساس حنا نكون الأوبجكت اللي من نوع كلاس معينة. So it's either 0 argument or 1 argument, so it could be more. Okay. ايش مميزات الكونستراكتورز؟ ايش المين features of it? So the constructor with no parameter is referred to a set of non-argument or 0 argument constructor. The constructor must have the same name, and this is important. So you don't call the class circle and then you put the constructor circle new or my circle, for example. Whatever you call the class, you see? Oh, and that's in the example before. So whatever you call the class, you call the constructor similarly. Okay? The constructor don't have a return. Never ever is going to have a return. Not even void. You see, you just created it has an argument if it's not 0, but it's not going to have a return. It's not going to return anything. It's just going to construct. It's going to create a new object. The constructor are invoked using a new operator when an object is created. The constructor play the role of initialization of objects. مثل ما كنا نعمل initialization إلى الarray, إلى string, إلى integer, you put a number, you call it a new something. The same thing is with an object. A class may be defined without a constructor. In this case, no argument constructor with an empty body is implicitly defined in a class. So ممكن انه هو يكون class ممكن you can define it without constructor. فin this case راح يكون فيها default with 0 argument constructor. This constructor called the default constructor is provided automatically only if no constructor are explicitly defined in the class راح نسميها default constructor. To refer to an object, assign object to references. So كيف ان احنا نعمل declaration إلى الأوبجكت؟ الأوبجكت هو عبارة عن references. If you remember guys, we said that type of variables could be primitive references. Again, ايش قلنا انواع ال references? Can you remind me of any type of data which is a reference is not a primitive? Good. String and an array. That's good. No, char Muhammad is not references. The char is primitive. So an object similar to the array and string is the references. So you put the class name and you put the object you just created. So مثلا احنا عندنا كان الكلاس اسمه circle. So you put the class name. And then an object name. The class name and then an object name. Good? So this is how it's going to be called. The class name and then an object references name. You created a new classes. So here is a type, the object name. Whenever you use equal, that means assign an object reference. لنيو معناها create a new memory. You haven't assigned anything to it yet. This is a new circle. All of it's going to create an object, new circle. And this is going to invoke, when you said circle, you remember one, it has zero arguments, it could have one argument, two arguments. This is invoked, it's going to call a constructor to initialize creating an object. This slide is important. It is going to help you remember what are the difference between different, the whole part of declarating the object, okay? Okay, so let's assume we're creating already objects. How we can call it, how we can assign accessing the member on that class. So you having the class, you having data x, y, and you having the method 1, the method 2. How you can access it? There's two ways. Either using a qualified name with object reference and dot notation. What's the object reference is the name of the object. It's the object reference. So you're having an object because we said it's a reference. Okay. So if we having object one, for example, which is the references to a place, which is having the same, for example, 3, 2, as a numbers, which is the variables. So that's why it's called object reference, object reference, okay? How you can use it, object reference, you can write object 1, dot method name, whatever is the method is, for example, M1, and then you assign an argument here. So for example, as what we saw in previous example, we having a my circle, which is an object reference, dot get array, which is the method. Sometimes we can just use a symbol name, get array, without references and dot notation, or just return a radius. But this is rarely used, and you need to be careful if you use it. You just use it if you're using it within their classes. So inside the classes, or if it's say it's a member, an inheritant classes inside it. We're gonna to use it in upcoming classes when we talk about inheritance for subclasses. So if you're having a class, you can have a class, and then you can have what is called subclass. It's like an inheritance. This is inherit from this class. It's not an object, but it has all the things inside this class. So if having X, and it has method 1, and then we creating a subclass, it has Z, and it has method 1, method 2. So that means this class is going to have Z and X, and it's going to have M1 and M2 because it's inherited class 1. So this is a class 1 and this is a class 2. Let's assume this is a subclass. So the class or what's it called, like baby class راح يرث جميع محتويات variables and methods from parents بالإضافة إلى الخصائص اللي موجودة عنده. In this cases you can use a simple name. So the qualified name, which is the safe way, this one. So this is what we usually used. Okay. So this is the most used one, which is stay in a safe places. Now we'll try to go through tracing code, and this is interesting animation actually. It's to try to make sure you understand what does each part means here. Okay, so first, here's the class name, the object reference name. So you just declare it, declare in my circle. You have no value, you have no reference, you have nothing. Then when you said new, we are not talking about equal, not yet, okay? Just we finished the first part. This is the first part here. And now we are talking about the second part. We haven't talked about equal yet. So when you said a new circle is the constructor. With how many arguments? Within one argument. So we're gonna get to go to that constructor, create. The constructor will create an object and change the radius as 5 dots. Later, whenever you said equal, it is going to put the pointer here. So this is the what's equal is going to do. If you're creating a new object, your circle, again, you just declare it. You haven't created anything. You create a new circle object. But this one with the default one, because it's with a 0 argument constructor, then you put as equal, which is going to assign the object reference to the circle. Later, you would like to change the variables, the radius. You can to use in name or object reference dot radius data and you put it equal. Okay. If you remember the idea of how you access variables and methods on the class, it's similar to what we did before with the string, with the math. So if you were having math, class math dot, then you call the math method name. We have a different method name, such as the bow, which is the power, 3 power. To invoke methods in the math class, can you invoke get area in the same way? You just put a simple circle that will get array? No. ليش ما نقدر نستخدم نفس الطريقة أن لما يكون عندنا كلاس الميثودز وننادي فقط الميثودز الكلاسز اللي تكون تحتها دايركت بدون ما نستخدم اسم اوبجكت، يعني احنا هنا ما كونا اوبجكت من نوع الميثود، بعد كذا قلنا دوت الماث الباو فور اكزامبل. We just use it right away. الاسم الكلاس دوت اسم الميثود. However, when you're creating a class, you have to create an object, then you put dot and use the methods. Why we cannot do the same things? Because math are static methods, which are defined using a static keyword. الماث string other classes اللي تكون جاية مع library راح تكون ثابتة already موجودة. It's not gonna to change, okay? So you don't have a problem, access it right away. It's a keyword right away. The compiler will know what you mean. لكن لما استخدم الجيت الاري الكompiler won't know what you are talking about. It's not static. It's not only for specific purpose, okay? So you have to specify we're talking about specific object references, as what we saw before. A data field can be primitive type as any other variable, or it could be reference. يعني البارت اللي موجودة بالداتا it's not always primitive. يعني مش فقط integer, char. It could be references. You see here? Okay, I forget to do this. It's a string is a reference. Integer primitive, boolean primitive, char is primitive. So you can use primitive or references inside it, okay? There is one important point here, guys. Inside the class, if you define any variables, either primitive or references, it is going to have a default value. So I need you to help me recall what are the default value for each of those. So what are the default value for string? The default value of the string? Any other thoughts? Okay. No, thank you. That's right. No. And then what's the default value of integer? I'll put your answer and we'll back to it. Okay. What's the default value of the integer? Okay, so you think is 0. Any other idea? Okay, what's the default value for boolean? You think it's false? Okay, the default value of char. Oh, let me see if you know this one. What's the default value of char? Thank you. Yes, you're right. So those are the answer. So default string is null, integer is 0, Boolean is false, and char dash u 4 zeros. So if data field of reference, it's always null. We already said what type of reference. It could be string, it could be array, it could be object. Okay. So any reference variable, it is going to be the default value of it is going to be null. So this is just going to see it again. But here you need to remember, however, Java assign no defaults. There's no default value to local variable inside the method. So inside the class, you have a default value. Inside the method, there's no default value. So here, if we having a class called a test, and then we creating students refer object from student type, student class, with a 0 argument constructor. Supposed to see looks like it's not appear here. I'll show you the example at the end. We are slide. Okay, so this is the student class, but doesn't show the methods. Okay. So it doesn't show the methods, it has only the data value here. So here, when you create a new object, student, you put a name, object reference, dot name, so it's going to call what's the name you save there. And the same with an age, and same if it's a science major or not, and gender. So because we don't use the methods here, that's why they don't put it here, okay? Okay. Again, I'm creating now a new class called test, and then I create a variable called x and another variable called y. So what is the default value of x here? Are you with me, guys? So what is the default value of x here, and what is the default value for y later? Let's say, what is the default value of x first? Okay, Hamad think is 0. Others said no value. Okay. So you're right, those who said there's no value. It doesn't have a default when it's inside methods. It has no default value, either an integer or string. Doesn't have a default value inside the method. The main is method. So inside the main, there is no default value. Inside the class, you have default value. No, Hamad, y is not null. both of them doesn't have any default value because they are inside the methods, not the class. So here, if you would like to print it, you will get a compiler error, a variable not initialized. Okay. Yes, because you initialize it inside. You initialize it inside the method, is not inside the class. Okay. Here is a difference between a variable of primitive data and an object as a references. Again, we did the same example when we talk about string array. لما تكلمنا عن string والarray, we emphasized a lot ان احنا تكلمنا كيف ان هي الفرق لما تكون primitive type ولما تكون references. كيف انك لما تغير تعمل assign انها تتغير address where it's going to point to any references. The same thing, we will see another example here for an object. Okay, so when we initialized the primitive type, okay, مثلا ان I equal to 1, it's going to be 1. When you define object type circle C, is going to be references to circle. So it's going to creating using a new circle, which is the constructor here. What is going to happen? We'll go over this one by now. Let me just change the color so it's not going to be all red. So the primitive type, when we say I equal to J, okay, that means before I was 1 and J 2. When we say I equal to J, we're going to change the value inside it to be 2. However, when we said for object equal to, you are not going to change the content. You are not going to change the value. You're going to change the pointer. So C1 is pointing to this one, and C2 is pointing to C2 here. Whenever you say C1 equal to C2, that means both of them is going to point to the same object. So this is going to be deleted, the pointing, and it's going to create another pointer to the same place that C2 is pointing to. Okay. As shown in the previous figure, after the assignment C1 and C2, C1 is going to point to the same object referring to C1. Okay. هذه المشكلة الآن اللي تكلمت مسبقا عنها. If you remember, there is an object is known as a garbage. Which one? The garbage is automatically collected by the Java virtual machine. So where is the garbage here? Can anyone tell me where is the garbage? If you know, okay, I'll tell you because I'm going to point to it here. So this is the garbage. Who's going to take care of it? Okay. Now you are pointing to this. This is no one is using it. No one is referring to it. So who's going to collect it? Who's going to take care of it? The Java virtual machine. Okay. So this is just a tip. You can put it null before you assign any object to another one equal to. You can use it as a null just to save you space there. Data fields can be classified in instance and static. Okay. What is the difference between an instance and a static? An instance it can be changed. الستاتكس راح يكون ثابت and for more than one used of object. هذا الانستنس داخل الكلاس راح تكون متعلقة to be related to one object. الستاتيك variable هنا راح تكون متعلقة ب more than one. The same things with the methods. It could be an instance or it could be static. Static is going to be used for any objects. راح تكون ثابتة. الانستنس راح تكون متعلقة في specific object. So an instance variable belongs to a specific instance, as I just said. من نوع السيركل هذا هو الكلاس. عملنا object اسمه my object, we call it my object, then creating it, we declare it with using a structure with one argument here. So this is here, the radius, our instance, because it's going to be for that specific one, okay? Then instance methods are invoked by instance of a class. So you having specific object references, then you're going to use it. So it's going to be again for specific object references. However, the static variable is shared by all instances of classes. Sometimes it's called static variables, sometimes it's called class variables. يعني ممكن نحن نسميها static variable or class variable. The class variable are used to keep count of the number of objects. So if you would like to count how many objects have you created from this class, you will use a static that is going to count the number of objects. Each object would have updated the counter, as we will see in the example later. The static methods, or it's called the class methods, is not tied to specific objects. ما راح تكون مربوطة أو متعلقة بobject معينة. It can be used with many of them, which is static constants are final variables shared by all the instance of the classes. So all of them is going to use it. Okay. You can access the class variable and method using the class name in these cases. Okay. Let's see this example. So here we use the static variables, which is used for what we said, for counter, to count how many objects we are creating. Then we will get to have a method called increment. It is going to increase the counter plus, which is +1. So okay, inside the main now, we creating object 1. I said a new variable demo, which is going to go to this class and invoke a constructor with a 0 argument. So this is the type here, okay? With a 0 argument. Then we create the other one. Here you see the default, there is no constructor. So it's like a 0 constructor. We're creating a new object and we're creating a new variable again. So you just create it, you do nothing. Later, for the first object, you call increment ++, and in an object 2, you call increment again. So I need you to tell me, in the first one, when we see print object 1, so we're having object 1, as a reference and you having class with a variable and methods, and then object 2, and it's gonna to have variables and method, which is with a type of variable demo. So we'll go to object 1, dot count. What is the result here? Dot count. What I'm going to get here? Any thoughts? Okay, thank you. So object 1 is 2. This is what you think, guys. What about object 2? What's the output of the second line? I already told you guys, if you're having a lecture, you can leave. I'll send you the report. I sent an email about the details, and I already told you at the beginning. Yes, you can go. Okay, so what's the result? Yes, all of them is going to be 2. You're right. Okay. Why all of them is going to be 2? I already take the attendance guide, don't worry. Why all of them is going to be 2? Yes, I did. I took the attendance guys, don't worry. If you would like to leave, just leave. So why all of them is going to be 2? Because the count is static. And it's going to be available for all objects. So whenever it's changed, it's going to be changed for all of them. It's not going to be count here and count here, no. We will have one only count for all of them. Okay, so it counts as the number of the object here. Now we will talk about what is called static constants. الموديفاير اللي راح نحطها قبل تعريف variables, that's what we're gonna to put it before it. It can be having different meaning. Okay. So first, if we having the public, what does that mean? It's available for other classes. The static معناها has one value for all objects. يعني متى ما عرفناها static, whenever we define it as static, it's going to be available for all objects. Final, that means it's going to be constant, like by, you cannot change it. Whenever you define it, you cannot change it, okay? Then we define a double. Double is the type of the data. It could be double, integer, whatever you are using it, okay? The scope of variables. ايش الحدود اللي حق variables, okay? The scope of instance and a static variable is the entire class. Whenever we define a static variable, what is the scope of it? Entire class, inside all, anywhere inside the class, you can use the static variables, okay? And you can declare it anywhere inside the class. However, when you're having a local variable, starting from, it is going to start from declarations and continues to end of the block. So if you're having a block, and you initialized int I, for example, it is going to be available inside this. Whenever you get out of it, it is not going to be initialized there. Sorry guys, I don't think so you're reading email or you didn't you even hear to me when I talked. I repeat the informations several times about the attendance. Okay. Static methods carry out a general function not associated with an object. فايش الفكرة اللي حق static methods? You can use it in a general function. It's not going to be associated with any object. The static variable can access directly with the static method. So if you're having static methods, you can access the static variable right away. Okay. For example, static methods, what's called maximum on the math. So عندنا الكلاس الماth, it has methods called maximum. What's this gonna to do? It's gonna to return the greatest of two arguments. إذا أرسلت two arguments into this method max, it is gonna to return the maximum one. Okay. So if you're sending the A and the B, it's gonna to compare them. If the A bigger than the B, it's gonna to return the A as the maximum. Else it's gonna to return the B. Okay. This is not associated with any object. It doesn't have any details about object. So you just send an argument and it's gonna to return what is the maximum one. The same things when you're having. This is just an example. So maximum is gonna to get two arguments here. Whatever is the argument. The argument, it could be calling another methods as well. Like here we calling it by again. The main method, the main is a method and it's a static method. So it is not related or associated with any object. Good. So let's see this example. So in this UML notations, we're creating a class circle. We're having a radius as a double. We have a number of objects, which is gonna to be constant. It's gonna to it's a counter how many objects we're gonna to have, and we're having two other methods. Okay. So if we're creating the first object, the object 1 and object 2, each object, so the first object has its specific radius and it has a number of objects. A number of objects here is not associated. You see it has an underline here. That means when it has an underline, it's a static. It's not associated with any object. You having it has, after you having two circles, you get to get two, and it's not get to having different value for each object. It's always having the same value for all objects at the same times. Okay. So now we will talk about concept called packages. الباكجز is an important concept. لما يكون عندنا أكثر من class، مثل لما كان عندنا الكلاس اللي حق الماث، you can have the by, you can have the maximum, so you have you have a number of classes, but there is a little relationship between them. Okay, what are you going to do? You put all of them inside one package. It's used to associate a number of classes that are closely related to another. If the class from a coherent group, they should be marked as it belongs to the same package. For example, Java collecting class name Java math, it has the math classes, maximum, by, minimum, power. So all is they all math methods, so they're gonna to be all inside Java that's the math package. So Java, math is the class here. Or the class it has the method, so all of them is going to be inside it. How are we going to call that package? You call import. Sorry. So you call import Java.math Whenever if you would like, you don't know maybe the exact method you would like to call. If it's a maximum, a minimum, or sometimes if you're going to use multi, it is a good idea sometimes just to call it all. Whenever you put the star, that means you call all the classes in that package. Sorry, not the methods. The whole classes in that package. Okay, so this is the package here. Now we will talk about the access modifier. The access modifier, there is different type of modifiers. There is the public, the protected, or the private. What we're going to cover today is the public or the private. The protected we will discuss it later. ايش الفرق بينهم؟ هذه الاكسس موديفاير يعني ايش صلاحيات الاكسس؟ قال ايش تسمح لك انك تستخدمي ايش؟ There is actually a 4 level of access. The default, there's no default. It's not a default keyword. It's a default access. Default access, when a none is modifier is specified, that means it's going to allow you to access everything. So the default modifier إذا ما عرفنا الموديفاير راح يسمح له يعمل access on everything, on all classes. So let's assume you're having class A and you're having a class B. Those are classes on the same package. And you're having another package with a different classes as well. الصلاحيات, how those classes access other classes is different. So for example, if it's public, the class data or methods is visible to any class in any package. So whenever you put it public, any class in this package or this package can access whatever you're having in A. So if we defining A as a public, yes, it's going to allow you to use it in all packages. So all it's going to access it. El B, if it's a private, for example, if we see B is a private, that means A cannot access methods and data on LP. That is going to access only by declaring a class. So if you're having anything on A, even if they are in the same package, it cannot be accessed to get the methods or the data. Okay? So here's an example. The object cannot access its private method as shown in B. So let's forget about what is written here. Let's try to understand the code. So we're creating a class C. Then we declare private Boolean variable X. Good? Inside the main, we declare a new object reference C from type class C with a 0 argument. Then we would like to print C.X, which is an X here. So here we're going to print this one. Then we would like to print C.Convert. So it's going to call private method, return integer, and it gets no argument. But it's going to test till X, which is we define it here as private. And it's going to return. This is if else statement. If it's true, it's going to return 1, and if this is going to be true, and if it's false, it's going to be 1. Here we are not care about the result in this example. In this slide, they just put it for you to understand the difference between the private and non-private. So here, for example, they define it as private, and you can access it inside it. So this is right, you can do it. However, in this example, so this is inside the same class. If another class test try to access an X, this is not acceptable. So this is wrong because the X and the convert, the X which is private variable, and the convert which is a private method in class C, you cannot access them from another class test, right? So this is the goal of this example, but it is a good idea sometimes to always refresh our mind how we trace the code, right, guys? So I need you to tell me, I already show you the results. Okay, I need you to tell me what's the result of this sentence. So if we print out C.X, what's the output? What we going to get here? We define it as X as what? As a Boolean. And it's inside class. It's not inside a method. It's inside class. If it's inside class, it's going to get any default value or not. And if it gets a default value, what is the default value? Good, thank you guys. So it's going to be false here. Why it's false? I know it's a little bit confusing. You see, you forget the information. We already talked about this just soon. Whenever you're defining variables, if it's inside the class, it's going to have a default value. I know some of you when see it here said, oh, we didn't define an X, how we know what it is? Yes, if it doesn't have any value, it's going to get to the default one, right? Okay, so it's false. What about here? When you call C.convert, we're almost done. We have 4 more slides. So what about this one? C.convert. What's the output of it? It's a private method. Yes, Yazid. But what's the result? No, it's going to access it. We're still inside the same methods here. See, we are all still inside the C. So it's going to access it. It's inside the same class. The main here is the method, it's not class. What do you think, guys? Yes, Nazir. It's the right answer. Nazir said the right answer. So هنا قيمة الإكس راح تكون false لأن هي هنا default معرفة داخل class. Okay. لما نادينا الconvert أرسلنا الإكس على أن هي false. If it's true, it's going to be 1. If it's false, it's going to be -1. So because it's false, it's going to return -1 here. Okay? It's a nice one to try, guys. Always try to trace the code because the exams is going to be something look like this. Any question about this one? So here, this is false, and this is -1. This is because this is false as a default. Okay. Why data field should be private? ليش حنا ممكن ان احنا نعملها مثل الكيس هنا؟ Why we make it private? we can just create it public. Why? Because we would like to protect the data, make sure it's accessed easily, and to achieve encapsulation principle. يعني إن أساسا نخليها each object has its own variables and methods and information, and hiding, which is our and information hiding, which is are of object-oriented programming features, encapsulations. What do you mean البرنت الأولى؟ الدot here C is the name, the reference object, right? Let me erase. I know which dot you mean. This one, right? You're talking about this. So C is this one. Then you said a dot because it's from type C. So we will back here dot X. This is what we called about how you access variables and methods. How you can access the variables? You put a reference object name dot and then the variable name, okay, or a method's name. Clear, Lujan? There is a specific type of methods called a getter and setter. So sometimes we need to declare a setter and getter method for each instance and variable. ايش هو يعني الجيتر؟ الجيتر it's gonna to do accessor. It's gonna to return a value of a specific variable. It's used to access the private attribute for outside classes. يعني أساساً نحن نرجع قيمة variable موجودة في classes, we use the getter to return it. The getter method should not change. ما راح تغير شيء. It's not going to change anything. It's just going to return, only return. All private attributes should have a getter. For example, we have a radius. We're supposed to create a getter called get radius. Okay. So inside the main method, then how we can use it, how we can invoke it, we said get a radius using the object name. So we put the object name, if it's for example like in a previous one, C dot get radius. A setter is the opposite, it's a muter. A setter is going to assign value. راح تسمح لك انك تحط او تعمل assign الى القيمة. It's one that changes the status of an object by setting the value of the instance variable. A setter method don't normally return a value. It doesn't return anything. It's just going to get an argument and it's going to assign it. Before I go here, خليني أسألكم سؤال. Let me ask you straightforward questions. الآن حنا في الستر حنا نقول إن حنا نحتاج الستر, we need a setter to assign the R, for example, the R to radius. If you remember before, we can create an object dot radius let me see if we have it here. مثلا زي هنا. And you assign it right away. You said equal to 1. ليش بدل ما نستخدمها right away اسم الobject أن نعمل لها assign بالرقم نعمل new method اسمها setter على أساس أن احنا نعمل لها assign إلى القيمة instead of using it right away أن الR تساوي الR. Why we need to put a setter if we can just use it right away? None of you ask yourself this? Okay, encapsulation principle. Okay, what do you mean? Why we need it? I know Alice, encapsulation. لا, it's not because القيمة مختلفة, هي نفس القيمة. If I'm asking you this, you're going to remember it later. You're not going to forget it. Because the data field is private, yes, because it's private, but even if it's a private, if you put an object name, dot, and then you name it whatever, you can assign a value to it. But why we need a set? I'll tell you why. Sometimes here they make it simple. Yes, it's a set value, but you can do a set value, you can assign value right away, equal to, and you put a number. Why are you using a method? To access it from a different method, you can access it, as long as it's already on the class, right? You can put a name, a reference of the object, dot, in name of the variable, and equal, and you assign value to it. I'll tell you why, guys. Here, for example, it's straightforward, but sometimes you, for example, need to put a condition. Okay, for example, if you put a radius, I don't think it's okay. Maybe it's here. Let me see if it's turned on. I believe this is the last slide. So just remember this question. I'll show it to you now inside the code, okay? Because this is the last question here. And we will be done. So this is circle. A circle is the class. A radius is double. A number of object int. Here is private, which is created as a counter. Sorry, it's a static. I don't mean it's a private, it's a static. Then you're having a circle, which is constructor with a 0 argument. And this is another constructor with 1 argument. You have a get radius, which is going to return a radius. And then you set it, when you say sending an argument here, set a new radius. There is a function called get a number of objects, and it's going to return integer. So it's going to return a number of circle object created. And there is a method called get area, is going to return an area. Okay, so this is the end of the presentation, but we will see this example in a real, okay? And then we will be done. So let me change the source. Okay. So here's class called circle with a private data field. Good? This is exactly what we saw during the whole presentation. You're creating a private double, radius 1. You're creating a private static number of object, which is a counter. Here is a construct with a 0 argument, a construct with 1 argument if you send it. Here is going to return a radius. Here is what I would like to take a look to. Why we use set a radius instead of just say object dot radius and we assign, for example, 125? Because sometimes you would like to make sure you get the right information from the user or the right value. For example, here you get to assign that, but with the condition as long as it's bigger than or equal 0. If the user enter any minus or negative number, you get to assign the 1 to the radius. So we use the set method in this way instead of direct initialization from a user to make sure you get the right one. Yes, Hamad, you're right. To prevent the user from entering, no. I mean, to make sure the user enter the right things, to make sure you write the right information in your object. Okay, so if the user, for example, puts a minus, you will assign 0. So that's why we use set instead of direct initialization. Okay. So this is what I would like just to emphasize for you, and this is what lets us go into the end of the meeting. So of meeting number 3. So please let me know if you have any question. And sorry to keep you late, guys. Muhammad, also I can do before sending value. You can do, but then you have to do it every time for every object. Sorry, it's not Muhammad. Okay, but if you have it inside the object, you don't have it every time. You don't have to write it every time because you have it already controlled inside the object. Okay. You will make another method. That's why the set idea is coming for this idea for keeping it right. يعني أنت إذا راح تعمل ميثود ثانية على أساس تتحكم بالقيم اللي يدخلها المستخدم، هي أساسا هي هذه الفكرة من الستر، إنك تتأكد أن القيم اللي هم مدخلها مش إن هي صحيحة أو لا دائما. أحيانا تتأكد هل هي تمشي متطابقة مع البوليسيز والأشياء اللي أنت عاملها داخل الكلاسز. This is you already have it في حمد الابديتد برزنتيشن هي هذه نفسها. بس I believe المشكلة ان اللي مرفوعة عندكم من الكوردينيتر رافعينها كبي دي اف، فعلى اساس كذا ما راح تقدروا مثلا تضغطوا عليها وتفتح لكم البراوزر. So I'll double check إذا كانت البي دي اف ما تقدروا تفتحوها، أنا ممكن أرسل لكم السلايدز اللي فيها الكود so you can use it and check it out. I'll check it out, don't worry. إذا كده راح أرسل لكم الكودز. في أي سؤال ثاني؟ already موجودة. So اللي موجودة الآن ممكن تسجلوا لي خدمة وتتأكدوا من الملف اللي أرسلت لكم هو على الإيميل، هل تقدروا تفتحوه؟ الشير فولدر اللي أنا واضعة فيه الملفات الميتينج واللاب، تأكدوا لي هل تقدروا تفتحوه ولا لا. تمام، إذا أنتم تقدروا تفتحوه يس في الملف اللي أرسلته اليوم بالإيميل already موجود فيه الميتينجز وموجود فيه الأكتيفيتيز اللي حق بكرة المعمل. وبالمناسبة المعمل قبل المعمل بساعة عملت لكم اي اوفيس راح افتح فيها المايك، اللي عنده اسئله واستفسارات ممكن يدخل فيها ويستفسر. الاسبوع الجاي I'm not sure about the date متى هو تاريخ الكويز exactly but I think انه هو راح يكون الاسبوع الجاي، راح يكون في اللي I'm sure about it انه هو راح يكون في الميتينج number 1 and meeting number 2 but when exactly I have no idea. الأسئلة multiple choice and matching. طبعا تقسيم الدرجات راح يكون عندكم 20 درجة حق ال TMA، 30 درجة 25 درجة منها حق كويزز، راح يكون عندكم 5 كويزز، 5 درجات راح تكون حق الاتندنس والمشاركة، و50 راح تكون للفاينل. يس راح يكون اونلاين كويزز، لكن اختبار الفاينل راح يكون حضوري. اختبار الفاينل راح يكون حضوري، بالإضافة إلى أن درجات الحضور later I'm not going to get it directly for everyone attending. I'm going to put some mark for participation. يعني اللي شغل المحاضرة ويتركها it's not going to get the full 5 marks as those who's participating. So I'll divide it in 5 marks. جزء منها راح يكون فقط للاتندنس وجزء راح يكون للبارتيسيبيشن. الفاينل راح يكون حضوري، لا ما راح يكون في MTA، راح يكون حضوري بالجامعة. So that's why you really need to understand the course. The quizzes, the TMA by itself is not going to let you pass the course. لأن 50% من الدرجات راح تعملوها بالجامعة. I'll find a way, Yazid, don't worry. بالنسبة إلى participation, I'll find a way to figure it out who's going to participate. You will see it in next meetings. Any other questions? I believe it's 15 minutes. I think so. All detail will be sent from the coordinators. It's okay, and I can't tell who's there and who's just coming at the end. No, it's not going to be like this, Yazid. You will see later. It's something simple for me and for you. Any question? If not, I have to go because in half an hour والجامعة راح تسكر فلازم أطلع قبل ما يسكروا الجامعة. Okay? See you tomorrow.